that I'm going to come back to if we can get in a pattern of being more available and ready, like on a weekly basis, that keeps someone from having those 3 month, 4 month. Because typically, if we can go 3 months, we can go 4 months. Or if we can go 4 months, we can go 5 months. And then you can imagine then we go 6 months. Well, then now it's 19 years that we've not had sex. So to me, that's an indication, if we're going 3 or 4 months, that something needs to be tended to.
This is Ryan and Michelle, and welcome to the Celebrate MarriageCast, where we hope to restore and reclaim godly marriages through honest and real conversations.
Welcome to our show today. We're so excited to have you joining us and proud of you for making this investment in your marriage, into your relationship. And Ryan, we're just calling today's episode, we're not numbering it, we're calling it a special episode.
Special episode, yes.
Because you guys, we just had a date night at Celebrate.church on Friday, and we are turning this show super quick. We are answering all of the questions that the audience members submitted as we had a special guest in for that date night. So we're going to unpack those on the show, but we are excited to welcome our guest from date night and a longtime guest of the Celebrate MarriageCast, Debby Wade, into our studio live and in person. Debby is a licensed family and marriage therapist, a certified sex therapist, and a CSAT. So welcome to our show, Debby.
It's such a privilege to get to be here with you in person.
Yeah, very exciting.
I love this.
I was looking back, you were on episodes 17 and 18, and this is now, we're around 111 episodes. So this is so cool to have you live in the studio.
Well, thank y'all for having me. This is just a blast.
No internet delay here either. So yeah.
No, well, Debby, it was such a great night, our Celebrate date night of just, we really kind of dove into the topic of sex and how important it is to have these conversations and to, I think, especially have these conversations in church.
Yes.
We don't always have that. And I think it was just a great night to dig in and really kind of recapped around these 5 essentials. And we'd love for you to give a recap of what those 5 are.
Okay.
And then kind of jump into some questions.
Yeah, our listeners, if you weren't at date night, you'll get a quick overview. And then we have about 10 questions that are just real life, vulnerable questions from people that we really want to get answers to.
Yeah.
So
Wonderful.
we're excited to hear those.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just so excited that Celebrate is willing to create a safe space in the church to talk about sex, because I think the church is the best place for us to be able to have dialogue around sex and sexuality, because it is so confusing and so distorting in our culture. And so I just
And the world's talking about it.
Oh, and the world is talking about it in such a distorted way. And so we can certainly understand why there's so much confusion about it. And so what I was addressing last night, that when we look at sexual intimacy in marriage, I feel like there's 5 essentials that have to be a part of that for us to really be able to be connected and close and intimate with one another. And so the 5 are that we ourselves need to be liberated sexually, that we have allowed ourselves to be forgiven, deal with false sense of guilt and shame, healed from trauma. And there's so many ways I think that y'all even offer for steps for someone starting that process. And so we want to be liberated so we can be free and open and vulnerable in our marriages. And then we need to look at sex in a way that we elevate sex, not to be the most significant thing in our marriage, but that we elevate it to a higher standard, to a more sacredness and holiness than as the world sees it. And so in that way, just handling it with the foundation that God is the one that designed us as sexual beings and designed sexual intimacy for purpose in the relationship. And then we need to be educated. So much of our education comes from, Hollywood and porn and distorted thinking. And so we really need to dive in to have healthy education around our sexuality, the differences between men and women, and our anatomy, and our sexual response, how so different that we are. And I provide resources for Chris just with some great information for couples to get educated.
Awesome.
And then we need to, sexuality needs to be celebrated. And again, the difference is celebrated. The fact that we get to have sex be celebrated. I think it's like renewing a covenant every time we come together sexually, almost like communion. You know, every time we take communion or the Lord's Supper, whatever it's addressed in your church, that when we do that, it's a reconnecting with God and our intimacy and the covenant we have with Him. And when we come together sexually celebrating, we're renewing that covenant. And then it has to be cultivated, which we can't be too lazy or too busy to invest in it. And so we must take time to cultivate our sexual engagement and sexual intimacy.
The last statement you said there, thank you for that recap, Debbie. I had actually had a star by that where you had said last night, Satan steals by busyness is one of the top reasons. That just really stood out to me. We talk a lot about busyness on the show and the dangers of that, but even in the sexual intimacy with your connection with your spouse, like that's one way that he steals from your relationship. That's really eye-opening.
Right. And you know, we get so busy, we're fatigued. And I can't tell you a time that wasn't the first thing that came out of a couple's mouth of, we're just so exhausted, we're so fatigued, we're so busy. And that kills desire.
Yeah. I think, Debbie, one of the things that I took from last night is really this concept of almost like a three-legged stool, right? And that I think so often we think of sex as a physical act. And I think often like people kind of put it in that box. But one of the things I love last night that sex is really a spiritual, emotional, and physical act. There's three parts to this, and it's so important that we recognize that.
Yes.
And I love that analogy from last night. I thought that was really great of just lifting this up to more than a physical act.
Yes.
Yeah. And the tying to our Creator too. You had said when we are aware of creation, we are aware of our Creator. If we go look out at the Starry Night or something, but likewise, when we are in connection with our spouse, we are also aware of our Creator because it's a gift from Him.
Right.
It's beautiful.
So there'd also be the opposite of that when we're not partaking in something that God has designed for us, we're kind of ignoring it. And so we're ignoring that sexual, spiritual aspect that God has given to us in a marital relationship to experience freely and unabashed and unashamed. It's kind of like we're putting our hand to it and choosing to ignore that. And I don't think God likes to be ignored.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for the recap. Do we want to dive into some questions? Unless you have any other recaps from the night. That was, Debbie, I'm really impressed that you got that. That was very concise because we had pages of notes from last night. So if you were there, you got
absolutely.
If you were there, you got so much from that. That was a very short, quick, but great, concise recap of it. So and I just, again, if you submitted one of these questions, thank you for trusting us with that. Thank you for being vulnerable. And I really feel like we have just a sacred sheet of questions here. These are people's intimate lives. So we're just going to start at the top and we'll ask you the questions that were submitted and we'll just kind of start answering them.
Okay.
So you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll start. So the first question that was submitted here is, how do I express to my spouse that I feel our intimacy is lacking?
That's a great question. I love it. And I think it's one of those things that we have to accept. These are going to be difficult, vulnerable conversations to have.
Yeah.
So I think just being vulnerable in that as I miss that connection with us. And there's a part that I know that I may need to work on the me that would keeps you from drawing near to me. And I'm willing to hear what you might need more of or less of from me. But then is there something going on with you that's keeping you from wanting that intimacy or feeling vulnerable enough to step into that intimacy? Because sometimes we do need to look at what am I doing that might be off-putting to my spouse, and am I doing some things that would draw my spouse toward me? But if my spouse has some things to work out, it really may not have anything to do with me. So there's that question that needs to be asked, and I think for each of us to be introspective. what keeps me from wanting to be intimate with my spouse?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think one other maybe thing that we've learned from, we have a professional counselor in the area, Tony Bohr, that maybe you met him last night. Him and his wife, Michelle, were there, but he had said that the best time to talk about this is not like in the heat of the moment.
Right.
The worst time. So if you are going to have that conversation with your spouse, don't have it as you're trying to have an intimate moment and things are heated and you're in an argument. So
Right. And not in bed. I think typically these would be kitchen table or sofa or sitting on a park bench, isolated, but not in the bedroom either.
Not like a high stakes heated environment. Somewhere safer and okay, great. Yeah. Okay, second question. As a woman, my husband often rejects I'm going to restart that. As a woman, my husband often rejects my forward intent on sex. It hurts my feelings deeply.
Of course. And I just grieve when I read that question because, we hear so often that it's the men that always have the high drive. They always want sex. And so for women, then when they have a higher drive and a desire for sex and their husband refuses them, it's crushing. And so, again, I would ask her to vulnerably step into that with him, to just say, I need to understand because this is so hurtful. And I desire that with you, and I desire to be desired by you. Now, that makes me think that this husband, there is something blocking him from doing that. And I don't want to assume all the reasons on why he could be, but most likely probably something either having to do with him internally that just keeps him from responding to her. But that's a real important question. I just grieve for her because I know that hurts so.
And
but if they can't talk about it.
And she's seen in the world that, like men want it and they'd, love to have it so often. So when she's feeling that way and wants to come to her spouse and meet that need and he's not wanting to, it probably, like you said last night, for a woman in that position, it can feel extra hurtful because that's kind of what you see and hear.
Absolutely. Yeah. And of course, I would, I'm a therapist, so I'm also going to recommend if a couple can't enter into these conversations by themselves, saying, would you be willing for us to go to a counselor together so we can deal with something that's so private and intimate? And, the first thought of that, people's like, the last person I want to talk to sex with is somebody that I don't know, Right. But often what happens is couples get in a loop of just a fight about sex. And it often takes a third party, a therapist, knowing how to redirect those questions and change the dialogue so that it's no longer a fight.
Sure. And also this is what you do all day long. So it's not that it has to be a normal situation for that couple, but it is normal for you to hear situations like this. You're probably not going to be super shocked when you like, oh my gosh, wow, you guys really, this is a typical conversation that you can help people with.
Right. If you'll remember, I said last night that 60% of couples struggle in some way sexually. And the desire discrepancy or not being able to get on the same page of how do we create a healthy frequency are the number 1 and 2 things that walk in our office around sex.
Yeah, I love the question only because like desire can vary. And I think oftentimes it's like, men have the high desire. And so like I really appreciate this question for if there are couples that it's opposite.
Yes.
Where the woman has more desire. I like that we're addressing the question because there are couples that is the case.
Right. In fact, research shows that it's about 20 to 30% of couples who struggle with desire issues that it is the woman with the higher desire. And so that's not dealt with that often, but it's way more prevalent and common than what we think.
Yeah. Great. Well, the third question here is how do we create intimacy after having a baby?
Wow. Now, y'all have done this journey. I mean, y'all know, y'all know this is a hard journey. And
because you're exhausted. You're totally exhausted, right?
4 years of no sleep.
Yeah. Sleep deprivation is not really good for building desire, So I think just sometimes stating the obvious is real helpful, that this is going to be a difficult season for a while with kids, and we're going to have to get real creative. And leaning into grandparent time. Can kids be with grandparents for a short weekend or a 24-hour segment? How can we allow you to sleep while maybe you're taking on extra chores, or what can happen to allow then the husband to sleep while the wife may do some extra chores? On how do we balance each other to help get sleep? And then I think doing a lot of the outside the bedroom touch and affection, this is when that can be really, really helpful. Because that outside touch of affection is just important as the erotic touch. And maybe that's exhausted at the end of the day, and all we have to offer is laying at opposite ends of the couch and rubbing each other's feet. Or somebody sits in the floor in front of the sofa and puts the head back on the sofa, and you get a facial and head caress, and maybe husband plays with the wife's hair for a while, or that kind of touch that, okay, it's soothing and relaxing, but doesn't require a whole lot. But when we're embracing that kind of non-sexual touch, it kind of stimulates and makes us, okay, I think I can have the energy for getting to the more intimate and erotic pieces. But I think just really being patient and realizing it's going to be a difficult season.
Yeah, that's good. I like what you said about being patient too. And I feel like you were really good at being tender with my emotions, because your hormones, like you said last night, your hormones are so all over the place after having a baby, and just there's so much going on, especially if you have a baby that cries and doesn't sleep through the night for 4 years, like you said, Ryan, and just has, sicknesses and stuff like that. You held my heart so tenderly, and that I feel like created more of the connection. Like we talked about, three-legged stool, when we were able to connect more emotionally, then that bridged the pathway for other things.
Right. And if a woman really enjoys hot baths, maybe it's a husband saying, while you clean up the kitchen, I'll go draw your bath. And then while you're in the bath, I'll get the kids down. And then come in and sit next to her at the bath, and whether it's rubbing her arms and hands or rubbing her feet, or if the bath's big enough and we can both get in the bathtub to just
that's
catch
sweet.
a moment together.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. Okay, fourth question. As I'm aging, is it okay for my wife and I to use an adult toy when mine is not working to its potential?
I loved that question. I just love people being willing to really step out there and ask something hard. I know that had to be really hard for him to submit that question. And I mentioned some last night that there are different seasons of life or different reasons that might impact erection. And some things are like heart disease or diabetes. Those are going to impact erections.
Yeah, totally out of their control.
And for a couple to have that dialogue of, a vibrator, something that for us to use together that is helped to be in stimulating and still fun for you, and I get to be a part of that. And so when couples can have that dialogue, again, as long as it enhances the intimacy and not interruptive. I think different toys and stuff could even be brought in, not even if it's erectile issues, if it's something that just a couple really enjoys that play. Where it would become interruptive is if, okay, now our intimacy is dependent on the toys or on the vibrators or on the props and not one another.
Sure.
And that way it becomes interruptive. But those things can be enhancing, and it just requires a dialogue around it.
And the key word I'm hearing too, Debbie, is that together.
Yes.
It's not her on her own. This is together, because this is for their marriage.
Yeah. And coming back to, again, something that we talked about last night is that orgasm with the hormones and all the endorphins that are released, it's a very bonding experience. And so for a couple to find different ways to bring each other to orgasm, even if intercourse isn't possible.
Yeah, that's great. Great answer.
All right. Next question. How do I get my husband to understand when I'm not in the mood due to hormone imbalance or a medically related issue?
Yes. That's a really hard one as well, and it's a good question. I think, again, stating the obvious, and we come under education, it would be helpful for couples to be educated. And so I would think to sit down, even pull articles or a chapter from some books that just talk about the necessary importance of our hormones being in balance, or different seasons of life that our hormones may be off. For a man to understand that it's going to impact desire, it's going to impact arousal, it's going to impact the way a woman feels touch and different sensations. And it's not something she's making a deliberate decision on.
Yeah.
It really is hormones that are causing that. So again, finding things, these are the touches that do feel good, and this is how I can be expressing affection or receiving affection. And then I'm going to come again. I think for us as women, we've swung so much from duty sex. Well, we don't want duty sex, but almost all the way over that desire has to be there in order for us to have encounters. And I don't think that's helpful either, because sometimes our desire might not ever show up.
Sure.
But do I have a decision that I can be willing to engage in something? And usually we make a decision to be willing if we can see value in something.
Yeah.
And so if I see the value in, if I make an initiator response to my husband, even though my desire is not there, I could do that because I see the value in connection and closeness.
Yeah.
Now, if something is truly hurtful, we stop that. If hormone is impacting how intercourse feels, the vagina walls may have less elasticity, and it may feel a burning or a rubbing sensation, and that's not going to feel good. We can try lubrications and things that would help with that. But again, then if that doesn't feel good, what are some things that a wife might be willing to do then that brings pleasure to her husband?
Yeah.
And again, I think we can make that decision based on having a willingness, because we could see the value in it.
Yeah. I've shared this on the show before too, is that, talking about, from the guy's perspective, the gals, like what is your number? Where can we, kind of meet here? But making that decision that I also want to meet Ryan's needs, because he is being pure with his eyes and his heart and what content he's choosing not to look to, because he wants to honor and keep our marriage bed pure. So that makes me want to be able to step into that decision more, because I want to help be the fulfiller of his needs. And I think it was a book that you had read that, any other option other than your spouse is sin. So I want to step into that. And sometimes it is a decision or conversation where it's like, hey, yeah, we can connect. Like, you know what, not tonight, but for sure tomorrow, or whatever that looks like. But
absolutely,
I will say too that hormones are a real thing. I have had, and Ryan has overheard some of these conversations, but in the last month, I have had 4 friends tell me that I think I'm going through perimenopause. And it is a real concern for friends my age right now. And just the different hormone things, it's kind of like, I don't know, it's like I feel like a teen that hasn't yet gone through puberty, like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to my body? I feel scared about it. And you're starting to hear about friends going through, perimenopause or, the menopause, or it's like, oh my gosh, this is no joke. People's hormones are changing, and that it does impact how your body feels. So I think as you have kind of overheard, you were in the living room and kind of were like, oh my gosh, I think you've gained more empathy. So just by being, and then for me kind of saying like, oh my gosh, like, I think these are things that might be on the horizon, someday for me, like you've gained empathy, and I think just kind of an awareness. So that conversation was good, So what do you say?
Absolutely. I think it's important to understand, as a man, like understand what changes are happening and what that makes you feel, and understand that. I think it's important to have that knowledge, for sure.
And that empathy goes a long way. If spouses can empathize with the other spouse, if I realize, you're not in control of this, and this isn't all about me. It's
Yeah.
not like just a rejection of me. There is really something going on for you, and I realize you're not enjoying it and liking it either. And so I want to be able to step into what it is that you may be needing. And so our being empathetic and compassionate to one another can go a long way for helping us connect in the bedroom.
Yeah.
I love the thought and idea that what we experience with one another outside the bedroom is going to follow us and flow inside the bedroom. And if we don't feel that we can have empathy and compassion, receiving and giving outside the bedroom, we don't think it's going to show up inside the bedroom. But if we do experience that outside the bedroom, then we believe it's going to follow and show up inside the bedroom.
Yeah, that's great.
Debbie, I want to ask one question here, because I feel like sometimes this gets like a weird thing with church, and so like part of, the opposite side of this is, as I think as men, like hormones change as well.
Yes.
And I think one of the things that, is it okay for men to, if they're having issues like erectile issues, like almost like they need permission to be like, it's okay to get treatment, to get those things. I think often there's a shame, or there's a maybe it's pride of like, I don't want to go in because I'm too prideful, or I have this shame of going in. Maybe just speak to that, and maybe like give permission to say like, hey, it's okay.
Right. I think it is. I would like to speak into that of giving permission that it is okay. We wouldn't do that with our eyesight aging and just going, okay, well, I'm aging and I'm just not going to be able to see, or my hearing's going, I'm just not going to be able to hear. What we're able to do in this day and age with technology and medical advancement and science to help with some things with aging. So I think that God cares about erections as well. And it's like, if something can be done about that, let's do it. Do it wisely. And, pride and shame will get in our way in so many ways. That keeps us from doing something that could be good for us, beneficial to us, and or beneficial to our spouse. And so for women and for men, getting treatment around hormones and doing some reading and exploration and visiting with doctors to go, what are some of my options? Now, I recommend that they go to a urologist and OB-GYN and not the low T centers. Those aren't going to be healthy places.
Yeah.
They're there to make money.
Yep.
So to really go to a physician that treats that. And, I was speaking with someone last night, and they were just even talking about some aging and incontinent issues and stuff. And men and women both would benefit from going to pelvic floor therapist. So a pelvic floor therapist is a physical therapist who just focuses and trained in pelvic floor issues.
I did that actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then,
which is like after a baby, like it's just like, like to go do therapy for it is great.
Right. And we think of it more for women, but men benefit too, because our pelvic floor is so important for our sexual functioning.
I've never thought about it for men. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
So can be real helpful.
Yeah. There's so much, like you said, there's so much out there, even for hormone help. If it's, natural, I feel like there are clinics all over our town of, holistic type hormone help and all of that. So yeah, that's great.
Thank you for asking.
I love that though. Like if you're having problems reading, like you're going to go get some glasses. Like you're not going to just be like, well, can't read anymore. Like apply that same, that same analogy to other things.
Right.
I love that. That's so great.
All right. How do you keep your relationship spicy?
Well, I'm not ever surprised by that question, because I think everybody kind of wants to know, how do we keep it spicy? Yeah. And so I think we have to look, what are we looking for in spicy? So I'm going to come back to that emotional intimacy and spiritual intimacy as well. If we're not working on those aspects, then trying to keep something spicy is only going to feel like it's just about doing something erotic and not about connecting.
That's good.
And so I think first we're looking at what we are doing in the emotional and spiritual aspect. So then the spicy can feel safe and playful and fun, because we know we have the safety around the spiritual and emotional.
Yeah.
Because spicy to one party in the spouses versus what might be spicy to the other, that's where we're going to come into what's preferences, But there are some great apps and websites, and one of my favorites is Ultimate Intimacy. And they have an app you can get on their listserv, and it's a Christian couple, and they have the card games, and they have an app that you can download that will walk you through fun questions to ask one another, and they start, just kind of playful questions all the way to more erotic questions. You can order decks of cards and take the cards on date nights. They have different levels of the questions in the cards. They have some playful toys and vibrators that are, I want to say, playful and non-threatening. But it's an app that's a great app.
What is the name of that app again, Debbie? Maybe we can link it on our notes too.
Ultimate Intimacy.
Okay, I got it right. Perfect.
And it's got games that can be played in the bedroom, and then they have a section of positions. And I love it. They use the little bathroom symbols, on female and male. So that's how they show positions.
Okay.
So it's very non-threatening as well. And it's a great app.
Okay, cool.
But again, if we're not working on the emotional and the spiritual, the spicy could have some parts to it that would feel threatening to one partner.
Yeah. That's a great explanation. The Kimberlines who are coming on, I think we're kind of switching around the order, but I think it will be a future show, next week or the couple of weeks after that. They have a bingo card, a spicy bingo card that I did I DM'd them. They're like, comment, whatever. And I did do that. So that's in my inbox, right?
Okay.
But they're another great, I love that you're looking for Christian resources, right? Like safe, trusted resources that are going to have like your marriage and God as the basis of it.
I am. Just because there's so many things out there that can end up being traumatizing and just real distorting, and then inviting in of things that really I think are not God honoring.
Yeah.
And we can have spicy and God honoring at the same time.
You don't want to, start going kind of in a skewed direction where then it's like, whoa, how did we get here? That's great. Yeah.
All right, Debbie, how do couples work through the frequency question?
I love that. And that is always on. Anytime I collect questions, the frequency question is always there. So everybody always wants to know, is there an exact frequency that is the pattern that all couples are supposed to, apply? And, some people are sitting in the audience usually going, I hope she's going to say 4 times a week. And the other part is, I hope she says once a month is okay, So I love what Lewis Smedes, he's a late theologian, but he wrote the book Sex for Christians. But he says that how many times is the wrong question, that we ought to be asking what's happening between the times. And so it still comes back to what's happening emotionally and spiritually. How are we relating to one another? Are we being attentive and attuned to one another? Are we able to be playful and have fun with one another? And again, playfulness can't come if there's not safety. Safety can't come if there's not trust in the connection and why we're connecting. So first, paying attention to what it is that's happening between the times. And then I think just in reality, we need to look at it. If the higher desire person is thinking they want to have sex 4 times a week, and the lower desires 1 is about what works for me, then we realize we both may not get what we want, but what can we work with that keeps desire there? And I really believe the longer we go without something, it's not like the longer we go without it, the more we want it, not with sex. Typically, the longer we go in a marital relationship, then the more difficult it makes for us to come back together. And this is not on a tablet, it's not in print. But if God asked us to come together at least 1 day a week, to set it aside for the Sabbath to be holy, and that we honor Him, we worship Him, we're our mind is set up on Him. And He asks us to do that in our relationship with Him. It's not the only time we're to worship. It's not the only time we're supposed to be in connection with Him, but at least one day to set aside. Then I would think we could take from that at least we're experiencing connection once a week. And if we're doing that, again, I think it's paying attention to the anxiety created. If going without for a long time creates anxiety for the higher desire spouse, then they're going to be the ones that anxiety is going to come in and go, well, can we, when, can we, what about today? What about tomorrow? That anxiety squelches desire. But if the lower desire feels like, oh my gosh, I'm expected to have sex 3 times a week. Oh my gosh, I wonder when those 3 times are. I don't know when I have the energy. And I know he's going to ask. I know it's going to be there. Or I know she's going to put pressure and wonder if, are we connecting today? That we don't want to keep creating anxiety. And so if we can be in a routine of at least once a week, then with that connection, what we're focusing on, it may make the opportunity for desire to come. And the lower desire person may just like, man, yeah, I do have the energy for that. And that was good and wonderful. I don't know why we don't do that more. And her desire or his desire may come. And then the higher desire person, that they're not in this anxious space of, I don't know when it's going to happen again. And we also talk around frequency, often around scheduling or spontaneous sex. And if spontaneity is keeping us from really having sex because we're just not spontaneously feeling it and moving on that, then spontaneity is not very helpful. If scheduled sex is pressuring, because, well, if I tell the person that when we're going to have it, then they're going to hold me to it, and it doesn't matter what happens, then that may cause a pressure. But I say for the lower desire person, if they will, in their mind, schedule a day mentally that this is the day that I am going to plan that. And although the lower desire person may be the receptive desire, we can choose to learn to initiate. And so if the lower desire would surprisingly initiate, then it's spontaneous to the receiver.
Sure.
You know? And so I think we can be creative in that without it being pressuring and killing desire. We could be creative in it, that it actually impacts desire in a healthy way and helps with the frequency.
Thank you, Debbie. That was great. What about not being sexually active due to unfair or unequal sexual actions? I'm trying to wrap my head around what that. So not being sexually active due to unfair or unequal sexual actions.
Right. I'm not sure I completely understand it either, so I will just respond to it in a couple of different ways. If we're talking about betrayal, if betrayal has happened, then absolutely there needs to be some time for healing if betrayal has been the unfair actions that have been harmful and hurtful. And I just love it that there's all kinds of things, resources out there for healing from betrayal. If it's unfair, meaning, like I'm just going to throw some things out there. If it's unfair that one spouse is always wanting to receive oral sex but doesn't like giving oral sex, then we may get stuck in that, well, then I'm not going to give if,
Sure.
They're not either. And again, we have to watch for pride issues in that. If it's unfair that one always orgasms but never pays attention to whether the spouse is orgasming or not, and that has a tendency to happen more if it's the male that is orgasming and then the wife is not, of learning how to just step in and go, hey, this feels a little unfair to me because you're always getting to, and I'm not. It only takes you like 2.5 to 6 minutes. It takes me like 15 to 45, which that's actually true of most men, from erection to thrusting and such to climax. 2.5 to 6 minutes, just right under 6 minutes, is on average for a male. For most women, to just be in that place to get their body ready and, yes, the desire, clear out all those thoughts in their mind of, oh my gosh, did I leave the milk out on the counter? And if I did, it'll be sour in the morning. Did I change the laundry from the washer to the dryer? If I didn't, what a mess that's going to be. Oh my goodness, I'm supposed to have muffins for soccer day tomorrow. And the uniform. Beige. Maybe we could paint the ceiling beige.
Is that funny to you, Ryan?
It's very funny. Yes.
Relatable. Yeah. It just, you got to clear the thoughts, right? Like, hey, love. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. I'm here.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I'm back. And so it may take longer.
Yeah.
And on average for a woman, it's 15 to 45 minutes. Now, I'm not really mathy, but I can tell the difference between 6 minutes and 45.
Yeah.
This is more of what I'm needing. And so, again, if they've talked through that and those are ignored, then you can certainly understand it's kind of hard to show up to the table when I've got a selfish lover.
Yeah.
So that's where we come back to let's be unselfish, unselfish enough to pay attention to our spouse and selfish enough to know what we're needing and ask for it.
I think too that, two thoughts that I have on this is I think that's all the more important for the spouse. It sounds like, I guess I don't know who in this situation, but maybe let's say it's the husband, to be really like connective during the day, to start fanning that flame, because it does take longer for typically the female. But also it's interesting if that's the case for the situation that maybe, so let's say maybe the husband's not getting connectivity because the wife is like, gosh, you never pay attention to my needs. If he would just pay attention, he might find that it's actually beneficial for him in the long run, because the more unselfish. And I think, Ryan, I feel like you're so great at just being like, hey, I want to make this like good for you too. And in turn, that creates a higher desire in me because he's unselfish,
Right.
Yeah, I think when you have that attitude of giving, I'm going to give, like you do get back, but having that attitude first of, it's not about just what I get, but what am I giving, and that's the focus. I feel like you get back.
You don't want to be used. You don't want to feel like you just want me so you can have enjoyment. It needs to be mutually beneficial.
Yeah.
And that's where you feel that connection, where you're like, this is really great for us together.
Yeah.
Exactly. And as I mentioned last night, that's not about being transactional. I'm going to do these things for you so that I get.
Right.
It's not that, but it's when we stay connected. There is a saying in our field that foreplay for men is everything that happens in the 3 minutes before intercourse. And for women, it's everything in the 24 hours between intercourse.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so just knowing that, again, coming back to that emotional safety and intimacy is just as important as the sexual. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. Debbie, there's another question, a little bit about frequency here, but I think it comes up when, let's say there's, a man wants to have it, let's just say like frequent, and maybe a woman is like weeks or months. Like, how do you bridge that gap when I think it's so far apart?
Right. Usually when a couple is in a space that it's that far apart, they really would benefit from sitting and talking with someone around their sexuality. Because for that far apart, it is just totally waiting on, I'm just going to wait till my desire shows up, or it takes me that long because something keeps getting in my way in order for me to be willing to participate. And that I'm going to come back to, if we can get in a pattern of being more available and ready, like on a weekly basis, that keeps someone from having those 3 month, 4 month. Because typically, if we can go 3 months, we can go 4 months. Or if we can go 4 months, we can go 5 months. And then you can imagine, then we go 6 months. Well, then now it's 19 years that we've not had sex. So to me, that's an indication, if we're going 3 or 4 months, that something needs to be tended to. again, is it past trauma that's getting in the way? Is it someone that's just going, I am only going to have it when I have desire, and my desire shows up every 3 months? And again, that comes back to being a little selfish, that I'm only going to focus on me and not really think about the you and the relationship. And I love the idea from the Hargraves of looking at the you, the me, and the usness of a relationship. And so we have to look at the you part in that versus what's just happening for the me.
I wonder too, so the last part of that, I'm just going to read that full question. What is the best way to spice up your sexual intimacy in marriage if the man wants to have sex often, but the woman can go weeks without wanting to have sex? What does a man do in that kind of situation? I wonder, are they also looking for, like, do I just meet my own needs? Or like, are they wondering about the here and now? What I'm hearing from you is they need to have this, no, like this is a conversation you need to go in.
Mm-hmm. I think it needs to be talked about, because I'd also want to know how attentive is that man outside the bedroom. I'd want to dig deep on what is going on, because you can't just have a flat answer for that. Okay, men do this, and that'll help your wife want to have sex more. I'd want to know what's keeping her from wanting to engage more, and how is he participating outside the bedroom to tend to her heart, to know her, to woo her, to pursue her. And because again, I'm going to come back. What we experience outside the bedroom is going to follow us inside the bedroom. Or does he only touch her when he wants to have sex? And that is often what happens, and we do a reconditioning without meaning to. If men don't have affection outside the bedroom, then any sort of touch is to lead to sex. It kind of trains the woman to begin to recoil. And so then there's not any touch. So they're both lacking in that affection and touch. So is he then grumpy and demanding and kind of coercive or pouty? Well, that's not a turn on, and then again, are there trauma wounds or guilt and shame that's not been dealt with? So that's a really deep question to unpack. And that's what we do as sex therapists, is we look at everything that's going on instead of just the statement.
Yeah.
I think it's important to note there's something you said in there, Debbie, of understanding why. Mm-hmm. I think oftentimes, like, it's easy for couples to be like, well, there's something wrong with them. And maybe it's understanding like a little deeper, instead of like, why are you feeling this? Why, like, maybe there is something that has never been brought up before, that there is some form of trauma or something like that, but if really understanding why, instead of just pointing the finger at your spouse and being like, well, you're not doing this.
Right. One of my colleagues that I do a lot of teaching and training with, and our intensives, we've been doing marital intimacy groups together for years. His name's Billy Grammer. He's in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. But he always says that we need to remember to think that there's usually something right with something wrong. Mm. And like if we take a situation, and I'm going to use it male, female in this. If a male is not safe, and he's pouty, he's grumpy, he's gruff, he's kind of punitive and argumentative, and doesn't listen to his spouse, so he doesn't feel safe. Well, there's something right about her not wanting to engage in that. Now, on the outside, it looks like something's wrong. They're not having sex. But there's kind of something right with the reason they're not having sex.
Sure.
And so, again, that's where we have to really unpack the you piece, the me piece, for the betterment of the us.
Yeah.
And both be willing to be introspective on why is this going on.
Yeah.
Okay, last question. How about when you have medical conditions that prevent from having intercourse?
Right. So I want to come back. We've kind of dealt with that in some of the other questions, that if we just focus on the only way we can make love is through intercourse, we will feel defeated and like, what's left for us? If we can accept there's so many other ways that we can make love to one another that may not involve intercourse. And again, oral sex, using hands and fingers, possibly some toys, coming into that space of, I want to bring pleasure to my spouse. And then even if we can't have intercourse, these are some ways that still is pleasuring to me. And, we don't want to minimize intercourse because it's a wonderful thing when it can happen. But we don't want to just remove all the other ways that we can make love and be sensual and sexual with one another just because intercourse can't happen.
Yeah. Yeah. So good. Debbie, thank you for just your heart and answering all of these questions and your expertise. I really hope that these are beneficial. And I think regardless of which question people ask, I think all of them are just so fascinating to hear the answers to, because if you're not in that stage, with medical things now, maybe down the road. So thank you for your time and expertise today. Do any of you have final parting thoughts?
Yeah, I love having this conversation. I do think it's so important, and I love that we're having it in a God-honoring way. Again, the world has so much to say, and I love that we're having this conversation with God at the center of it.
And I just love it that you're willing to invest in this and do this. I love it that Celebrate offers the date night and then the podcast to be able to cover. And then I love it that couples feel safe enough to submit such significant, important questions. And it's just it's just great to get to dive into them.
Debbie, we're going to have you, thank you. And we're going to have you back in about a month when we're going to dive into the myths around sex and intimacy. So we're excited to jump into that. We've seen the list, and there are some good questions or good myths on there that we're going to demyth. So
awesome.
Thank you to our listeners for joining us today. If you were one of the couples that submitted a question, thank you so much for trusting us with those questions. And we want you to know that we have additional marriage resources at Celebrate.church/marriage. We will link the resource that Debbie talked about in our show notes as well. And we look forward to seeing you again on Friday for 5 Minute Friday. And we hope that you have a great week.
Have a great week.